This is The Real Gig with Bret Alexander.
Very nice. Chad Evans.
Good to see you.
The tables have turned.
The tables have turned.
This is fantastic to me, man.
I'll be the judge.
You'll be the judge of that.
I'll be the judge of that. To see how this
Usually
goes.
you're in my seat.
I like it better being in your seat than in this seat.
I'm getting to the point where I like it. But anyway, I was whatever episode this is we're fairly new doing this. So
yeah.
And I at some point I wanted to have you on, and I've had several other like guys, radio guys and crew guys. I got to have those guys are coming on eventually. You know what I mean?
I want both of them on.
I want all Swank and Krebs. That's going to be the Swank and Krebs show. They're going to be in charge of sound effects while the show's going on.
I like that.
We need
Okay.
But anyway, I felt it only fair, since you're the producer of my podcast, among many others, to do an episode with you before anyone else of your ilk comes on.
Before anybody with real talent comes on.
No, that's not what I mean. But maybe that is the case. I
think it might be the case.
So yeah. Anyway, in your case, like. Talking about myself, for me, my whole career has always been, music, and I got a couple little offshoots. You're like Mr. Renaissance man.
Yeah.
Like even today you have your Stone State Golf, and you're like, that's a tournament that I do. I'm like, really? You started in radio, so I want to talk about radio. Everything from the radio to doing, the video production and documentaries and freaking murder mysteries,
murder mysteries,
and podcasting now, and all this stuff that's going on here with this building, and and there's your band Blade Horse is
coming out in 2 years.
In 2 years, that's going to be worked on this summer.
We're just trying to find the right producer.
I'm in. Right. Sign me up. I'll be there. So anyway, you have all these things that you do, and I want to talk about how that happens. Because with music, I'm up for anything. For me personally, I'm like that. But otherwise, I'm kind of monkish. I'm 90% get off my lawn.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, but with the music thing, I'm in. But you have all these other things that you do, and you're also like real community minded. I've noticed that about you as I got to know you more when you were here. And
I have a little passion for philanthropy, and I try to bring friends on involved.
Well, yeah, in the coal region, you know what I mean? And that's, I want to tie that to the radio stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's start at, you're a Penn State graduate?
I'm not. I went to school at Luzerne.
Oh, you also went to the LCC?
I went to LCC.
My wife used to teach there.
Yeah. I think I graduated. I don't know what I have. I have a lot of credits. I don't know if there's an associate's in there somewhere.
There probably is.
It's somewhere in there. But it's funny you brought up LCCCC because I was there and I was going to school for recording engineering. That's what I was taking up. This is after a medical career that didn't work out.
There was a medical career.
There was supposed to be a medical career.
Really?
There was supposed to be. So right after high school, in high school, I played all the sports and I did the theater and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed all that. And in high school, my guidance counselor told me, Chad, not everybody's made for college.
Right.
And I didn't know what to think about that. I didn't know how to take it.
He wasn't saying that. He was about you specifically.
Yeah, it was a little off-putting. I wasn't the smartest person in the world, and I get that. But, all your friends are going to college, and I did have plans to stick around the area. So my mom is like, well, there's this program at Penn College for X-ray technology. Why don't you go and do that? I said, okay. So that's what I did. I went there, and I lasted a semester. I did well. I just didn't like it. There was something I wanted something with entertainment, something with the arts. I really enjoyed all that stuff. But, when you grow up in Northumberland County, there's not a lot of options to get into the field. And nobody told me anything about radio. I didn't even know that was a job.
Right.
All I knew was Howard Stern and maybe another jock or two, but I had no idea that was actually a job. But anyway, I really enjoyed music, and I couldn't play a lick of anything. I can't sing of anything. You'll hear that with Blade Horse. But when I found this certificate program at Luzerne for recording engineering, and I
still
went,
exists.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
All hands-on experience. Your end of your project is to make an album.
I'm thinking of your age. Paul Sinclair wasn't there.
Paul was there. Yeah.
Really?
Yep. Paul Sinclair was there.
I knew Paul.
Yep.
I know Paul. I haven't seen him in many years.
A lot of great guys up there. A lot of fun. Really cool. It was interesting. Like we were doing that. We were in studio, and you make your project, which is an album, and it was terrible. It sounded terrible, but I had a lot of fun. It was the year after I graduated, and this thing called Pro Tools came out. We were still recording on analog.
Yeah, analog ADAT machines.
ADAT machines, and we're using a Mackie 32x8, mixing console, and it was a lot of fun. But I'm glad you brought that up, because that was the time. I think I was 21, going there at LCCC, and I called Saturation Acres. You did? For a job shadow.
Did you?
For an intern. I called. I remember it. I was at myself and two of my buddies were living in a house out there in Overlook, and I wanted to get some real world experience. And I remember opening up the Yellow Pages, trying to find a recording studio, and I found Saturation Acres, and I called. And I'm pretty sure you were the one that picked up. And I said, I'm interested in an internship, yada yada yada. And you're like, yeah, man, come on in.
Yeah,
that's what you said right away. I don't know why I never did. I don't.
So, yeah, I was saying I didn't remember you.
It was, I think, on me.
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't know why. Immediately after that, I started working. As soon as I graduated, I started working part-time at a radio station with WQKX. And during that time, the afternoon girl left. They called me, and then I got my full-time job.
Sure.
For $14,500 a year.
There you go. Big money.
I remember calling Dad. I said, I got a full-time job. Because that's great. I said, Dad, I'm making $14,500. He said, congratulations.
Big money.
Big money.
When like we Paul and I being on here, I remember our very first actual Badleys, with the band, like our first paychecks.
Really?
They were like $98 a week or something like that. I mean, it was like insane. And we were, doing some business.
You're doing some business.
When everything was left, whatever, that was what was left for the band.
Right.
So yeah, humble beginnings, but it always starts the same. You're like kind of get your in there, and then somebody says, well, they can't make it. Somebody's sick, and you got to hop in the seat, and then that usually gets you. And it's the familiar tale.
Yeah. I got in there, and I really enjoyed it. I never thought about the money. I couldn't believe anybody was paying me to talk.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. Yeah. And then shortly after, I got a raise because I was doing so good. 19.5, and I said, "This is it. This is unbelievable. I'm getting paid $19,000 a year to do this."
There you go.
Game, set, match. I was sitting pretty.
Match. You're still pretty. And then here you are today.
It's still at 19.5. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's like, back in the day, like, from my perspective, a musician's perspective, it was like, radio was kind of king.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly for a band like, the bands that I was in, and others as well. Like I know, like QKX was supportive.
Yeah.
Of the Badleys. I know they were supportive of Panacea.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And like the thing that was, and you guys have a lot of power.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's a pretty big coverage area.
Yeah, 50,000 watts.
Yeah. So then it was like, when you guys are like, you're servicing like the 20 families in Centralia whose backyards are on fire for the last 100 years or 70, 80 years, whatever.
Sure.
And the Long Island girls in the dorm rooms in Bucknell, what I mean? So
yeah, I was fortunate enough to get into
cross section.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to get into radio still when it was in its heyday, like still when it viable. And I don't want to say radio's not important right now, but it was a different game back then. Now we have all the streaming services and all the Alexas and stuff. But then it was, people would come out to see you at a bar if you're doing a live appearance and stuff like that. So that I was still fortunate enough to kind of get into the real true radio. Mm-hmm. Now a lot of it's recorded. They call it voice tracking, but it was live back then.
Yeah, it was live, and it was really like connected to the community
for sure.
You know what I mean? And then we had all these little stations. Mm-hmm. We had like a promoter that did some promotion for us when we were starting out. This guy's name was like Heavy Lenny. And like Heavy Lenny and Heavy Lenny was just like we'd be sitting in meetings in our band house and all the ads came in via fax machine, so it'd be like and we'd sit there and Heavy Lenny got another one, but a lot of them were local, and we had personal relationships with I'm not even going to start naming them because I'll forget somebody. You know what I mean? But there was a lot of support, and they didn't have to do it. Like they were connected to the community, and not everybody. Sometimes when you get into these stations, you start meeting the jocks or the people running the station. Like they might be connected to the community itself, but they're not connected to, like, they play music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they're not necessarily connected to what's going on in their backyard.
Right.
Like if Coldplay was brewing in Avoca, they'd have no idea.
No clue.
Nor would they play it.
No.
You know what I mean?
No.
Now, if they went to New York City or they went to Philadelphia or something and then started to break out of there and then came back home, everybody would claim them. So
most radio personalities at some point in their life wanted to be rock stars.
Sure.
Right. So they really love that vibe of it. And, to see local musicians do so well, they want to kind of jump on that bus too and be supportive as possible, because that's something that they've always wanted to do. And it would always, just be really nice to see a community band really make it out there. You know what I mean? And whatever a local station could do to help boost that is just a little tap on their shoulder, a little pride to them,
Sure.
Yeah.
And I could start naming guys that were good to us back in the day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's like so many of them, and many of them I've worked with, doing studio sessions. A lot of them are musicians. I've recorded, their records.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I mean, some of them still to this day. I mean, QKX, we still stop by and do a live one. Like Glenn Hamilton at the river down in Harrisburg, we still stop in every once in a while.
Yeah.
And people I should have on. Blake, was at ZZO, now at WMMR. I want to have him on here.
Yeah.
And they have all these stories, and it used to be all these characters. You had like Pierre Robert in Philly, and like there was this one radio personality in New York. His name's Vin Scelza, and this just shows you like everything's so available now. It didn't used to be. I think it like loses value in a way.
It does.
Because like our manager Terry used to live in this, outside the city, and Vin Scelza had a Sunday show. I'm pretty sure it was on Sundays.
Yeah.
And he would like literally tape them on cassettes.
Yeah.
Like just tape his whole radio show on cassettes and mail it to us to listen to in the van.
Yeah.
This is how much we valued.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
How much we valued like a good DJ.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
And and it's like now, like you say, a lot of it's voice tracked, or it's there's not. I mean, maybe there is somewhere, or maybe there is more places than I know. But it's like there was a little more. I don't know, the live DJ.
Like an AM station would have weather on the nines.
Yeah.
Weather on the nines. Well, no, it's just on your phone.
Yeah.
Same with sports scores and even news.
Yeah.
People are getting the information before it hits radio.
Yeah.
So, you see that a lot in the industry.
Yeah. Twitter.
Twitter, of course.
They're going to get it before
people
the
are going to obtain their news one way or another, whether it's true or not.
Yeah. Right.
But,
like those guys, like a Freddie, like a Freddie Fabry, all these
great example.
colorful characters that we just, I mean, I drove home listening to him many times, just cracking up.
He was the best.
He was the best.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like my co-writer Mike Nadok, the tiny little station. Like you go up into his office and he's got the little like cup of day old coffee with the spoon that's stuck to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like him and Freddie both knew more about music than anybody you knew. I could just go through, like I said, I'm going to say a couple names and I'm not going to say all of them.
You'll miss them. But Freddie's a fantastic example. He's been in here.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see him as a guest on your show too, because Freddie, I mean, he's like the quintessential radio personality where he actually invested into a band and it went gangbusters.
Which might have been somewhat of
Maybe.
But it worked.
Yeah.
It did work.
Yeah.
Maybe
I don't know.
I don't know. But like, hey, he was all in. He was all in. And he told me, like I said in another podcast, I said he told me, with the Breaking Benjamin guys, he said, Bret, it's going to be a bidding war. And this is like, like he's saying this 2001.
Yeah.
And we're coming off of label hell, and we don't have the most positive attitude
towards the industry.
Yeah. I mean, we were trying to redirect, because like we had been in a band for 10 years traveling and touring. And so we started moving over and to continue to do that, but to do studio sessions.
You're pivoting.
We were pivoting, or like maybe like a little bit of a tributary. And we were doing that. And so, I mean, we were like a little bit, yeah. Music is great. Yeah. Love it. Absolutely deserving.
Yeah.
But, but he ended up being very correct.
Yeah, he was spot on.
And like a couple decades later,
yeah,
not the same guys anymore that started, but it's still very, very popular.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I was always big into music. I knew music. Yeah. I didn't know how to play music. I don't have an ear to know what's in key and what's not. But I wanted to be a producer. I wanted to work, I don't know, Nashville or something like that. That's where I wanted to go.
Did you were there like independent radio promoters and stuff that dealt in the market like at your place?
No.
So you guys were making your own playlists.
Sure.
At that point.
Yeah. So, well, yes. And we still do, to be quite honest with you. I mean, Sunbury, Sealands Grove, Lewisburg used to be a radio market. It's not a radio market anymore. For a couple of
like
reasons.
P1, P2, whatever.
Yeah. So you had your spins. Yeah. Your P1, P2. We went through, I think, like A1, B1, C kind of thing. But we were a really small market. I want to say it was like 256. Like New York's number 1, LA's number 2. We were like 250 something as a market. But we didn't have independent record labels really beating down our doors.
I meant independent promoters.
Or independent promoters. Not
really?
Not really. Not really. It would be members of the band. A lot of times I would want to come in and yeah, for sure. But no, we didn't have.
I think that's cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
it's awesome. Like when I first started in radio, you'd get that all the time. I know I'd get it all the time. A band would come up and give me their CD.
Really?
Like, can you get this on the radio for me? I said, absolutely not.
Yeah,
Can't do it. We still are a top 40 station, so we would kind of mirror the other playlists coming from like Z100.
Sure.
New York and stuff like that, and kind of mirror that. But like, with the likes of Breaking Ben, the Badleys, Panacea, even Kinsey. We played Kinsey records.
Cool.
You know what I mean? I mean, somebody had to play them.
You were playing them, but the thing about it, the distinction, like you were playing them on prime time. You weren't putting them on a local show.
No,
at like 11:30
these
p.m.
were in rotation.
11:30 p.m. on Sunday.
Right.
You know what I mean? It wasn't like that.
No, nothing like that. No, these were in rotation.
In rotation, being played
on a certified FCC radio station, 50,000 watts.
Yeah, I mean, but how do you? I mean, like that's super cool. You know what I mean? And that I always like. There's this book by this guy's name is Richard Florida, and the name of this book is The Creative Class, and he does like a whole chapter on, the importance of a music scene to the culture of a community.
Right.
You know what I mean? And like, you have guys. I wrote a piece about this years ago. Was like, have guys that maybe played professional baseball or football or something, and like then they are revered for their entire lives. Their careers might be 5-10 years old. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Some of these musicians are out there playing, touring, still living in their communities, and a lot of people don't even know who they are.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like they're not really looked at like, writ large or whatever the word, the phrase would be, like as something like for that community necessarily to be proud of, in these places. And I think that cool, with these smaller markets, that they're giving some sort of an opportunity just to get heard in prime time, not like you're getting shoved over here.
Yeah, you're on the mornings and the afternoons, and for sure.
I mean, like to this day, like once again, I can't mention everybody's name, but like like Alan Stout still plays our stuff, plays bands up in Northeast PA, via the radio weekly, and that's a super cool. I don't know. I just find that just something that was like different than it is now. And it's like kind of like now you have access to everything. You can reach everybody, but you're in this massive sea. And I think, like kind of like you want to like start from your community and go out.
Yeah. You have to blow out. You have to blow up from your backyard.
Yeah. From, like from this place, I go,
Yeah.
I think that was always our philosophy. And I don't know, I don't know. I mean, I work with a lot of young musicians now, and it's a little bit different, because there's not record deals like there used to be, and it wasn't like somebody could go from being, a complete schmuck to on top of the world in 6 months.
Sure.
Like, I mean, it doesn't seem to happen that way as much as it used to.
Yeah.
Certainly not in the kind of music that I record.
Well, it's right, and it's so hard to be noticed and be found. Radio was that medium, and MTV for new music. Right on. Now it's not. People stick to their core artists that they know and love, and they stream them or YouTube them or whatever like that. But those days are gone. Honestly, I can't tell you the last time when somebody came up to me with a CD and say, "Can you get this on the radio for me?" Yeah, like I don't remember the last time that's happened. So with radio being,
they're not even asking.
It's not even asking. No, and that's okay. So it's not that new music medium anymore. Mm-hmm. A lot of times radio is just in the background.
Right. Yeah, or talk radio.
Right. But it's free.
Yeah.
It's a free medium.
It is. And, like, I don't know, I've lost my train of thought. Yeah. It's kind of, it's just like, it just used to be a little bit more on the front. I mean, not a little bit. It was the cutting edge. And like for somebody like us that were like playing, we just kind of had to wait for, because we're starting early 90s, 89s, 90, 91, is Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Soundgarden, and then we have mandolins. Yeah. You know what I mean? So we just had to wait, and keep doing what we were doing, and just kind of, and then so now, like what I always say now is like, we can still play, we can still do shows, old men that we are now. Right. We can still do shows and play in front of an audience that knows our music, that probably heard us on the radio, or they saw us in a club and we came off the stage and said hello. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Those are the people you keep. Like you play like an arena show, and people, it's great. It's a stupid analogy, but it's like, when you go to the car dealership, they put a Corvette in the window, but when you walk in, you buy a whatever. Yeah. You buy a Hyundai, or you buy a, you buy something practical most of the time. Most people do. Right. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, you talk about, you played with, you played with, the guys in Led Zeppelin. You did arena tours. You played the LA Forum. You were
with Seeger.
Yeah, you did all these things. No, and it's like, the fans that have followed us through that whole thing are the people that saw us in some coal region bar around here, or some other city somewhere else. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's like that's it. True. Look them in the eye. You're in their town. Yeah. You're in their community. You went to their radio station. Their DJ, and that was part, like when we got a record deal and we were out there, touring more extensively than we had been, that's the first thing they did to us, send us to radio, which when we toured, yes, but like they said, like, these guys are likable guys. They're like somebody, like we feel like if they get to know them, they'll want to help them. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So like doing those radio promotional tours, country music still does that quite a bit. They still do. Really? Yeah. Yeah. Like they would come into Selinsgrove when I was working at those radio stations out in Selinsgrove, and they would pop in once in a while. Yeah. And play for us like a private showing. Sure. They would, their label would take them on a country music station tour up and down the East Coast kind of thing. So pretty interesting. So yeah, country music still does that. To get their spins played. Was there anybody that came through when they were starting and then? Yeah. Wow. Help me out, guys. Country duo. They had a song that broke through with Nelly. Florida Georgia Line. Oh, really? Florida Georgia Line. These two guys show up with acoustic guitars, and they did a thing on the radio. Nice guys, cool. Yeah. In Selinsgrove, and it was a month later that they had that massive hit. Yeah. With Nelly joining them on the song, and they became the biggest stars there for a short period of time. Yeah, they were big. I mean, and I think Florida Georgia Line was, I mean, like their label would have been, involved with like would have been Jimmy Harden. Yeah. Which is from Wilkes-Barre. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. It is pretty cool. Yeah. And they still do that. And by the way, we still have the Badleys in rotation.
Oh.
To this day.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I don't call it a classic cut. But
no, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
But yeah, we absolutely do.
That's cool. Mm-hmm. So, you know, like, I mean, just kind of going through and talking about, you know, like just radio in general, like that's where it was, you know, and I just thought it was, I mean, like for me, it just kind of like, I always thought it was great, you know, that it was like actually possible to get, you know, to basically I don't know how to say it, like, you know, like look them in the eye, go meet them, you know what I mean? Talk to them, you know, just kind of boots on the ground and get a little bit of support from these people that had a little bit of wiggle room. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Now it didn't make your career in like, if you're from me being the musician, it didn't make your career being on a radio station, you know, but it helped.
We gave you a little gravitas.
Yeah, it did.
You know,
and I had a experience once. This is related, but we went to we were releasing the Cellarbirds record, Perfect Smile, and we hired a. You know, this was when I like really learned like what we had experienced here wasn't the way it was, you know, in a lot of the rest of the country. So we hired a radio promoter to promote that record to radio, you know. Yeah. And you know, he started making his way across the country, and you know, we were getting inroads in, you know, like Keishi in San Francisco, and like XPN and all these stations all over the country. And there was one, I can't remember the call letters, but it was in Indianapolis, you know, and it was you know, and they asked us to come out and play like it was like at a minor leagues baseball stadium, and we had to play a show, and I had to like get up in the 7th inning stretch and sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" or something like that, you know, standing on a dugout. We did that, and like, you know, they were like, we had like price and positioning in the stores, and we were getting like 24 spins a week, which was a lot. That's good. That's a pretty big market. And we had price and positioning. We had a gig in the area. We had cool things going on. There was press, the whole thing, you know, and we like went out to dinner with the radio people, and they're like, you know, like this is Paul and Ron and I, you know, and they're like, you know, and they're like, well, you know, because, you know, how's the label treating you? You know, we're like, you know, they're great. They're small. They're small, but it was us, you know. So like there was no label. Yeah, no label. There was no label at all. You know, it's like, they're small, but you know, we're pretty happy with them. We're hoping to do many releases with them. You know, and so you know, so anyway, but so they were like real supportive, and they kind of like, you know, they knew the history, you know, where we came from, and they really loved the record, and they wanted to break it. And so we did all these things, and you know, everything I mentioned, and we went home, and like we kind of got our BDS and I'm not BDS, like SoundScan. Yeah. You know, and like that for the previous week or the 2 weeks past, like, you know, it bumped, but it was not much of a not much of a bump, you know. And we were like, and I'm like, well, so I called the radio promoter, and I said, you know, if this doesn't do it, you know, like I'm like if you're like putting like that level of a push in a city, and it doesn't, you know, and that doesn't move the needle more than that, I said, what does, you know? And this always stuck with me. He just said, well, he said, if you're spending your last dollar on this, stop right now. He said, but if you want to build, you know, you want to build the brand of your label, you want to build the brand of your band, this is how it's done. You know what I mean? Boots on the ground. Boots on the ground, just one person at a time. Go in there, meet them, shake their hand, come back, you know, shake their hand, play another gig. And, you know, and if there's something there, you just got to be able to hold out long enough for that to take hold. Right. You know what I mean? But then you got to find those friends, and, you know, like for here, we were able to find those friends in low places, you know, at the smaller stations. Yeah. You know, that we were able to get, you know, and I think like a young person thinks, you know, well, I don't need a radio station. I can put it on Spotify and just send everybody a link. but there's no person there.
And it's still true to that day, to this day, is
Really?
that you still have to have boots to the ground.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so true. You know, you see that a lot of times of like, well, let's make, you know, before the song is even released, they're going to like, well, we got to do a music video. We got to do a music video and put that up on YouTube. We have to drop this right now. It has to be right away. And they'll put up on YouTube and they'll get 1,000 views and they're like, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, back to drawing board. Okay, another song, another video. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you still see that a lot with, and I guess that's just instant gratification maybe on their part, but I don't know.
I don't know if people, maybe they underestimate. I mean, I can't put it any other way. They underestimate the human touch.
Maybe, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's not easy.
No,
it's not supposed to be easy. If it were easy, everybody would do it. But it's
Tom Hanks, League of Their Own.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be hard.
Yeah, it's supposed to be hard. It is, and it is. It is. You know, I had a lot of friends that are good musicians, and they're like, well, we're gonna move to Nashville. Yeah. And we're going to go and just make something themselves. But they didn't know that when you go down to Nashville, you can't spit on somebody without being an artist.
Yeah.
You know, so the level of competition was a lot higher down there for sure. But it's hard. And the only way to do that is really to go out there, boots on the ground thing, and just really, you know, you have to play free gigs. Play a gig for $100, get your music heard that way. But you also have to be a good hang.
You got to be a good hang. You got to
know?
be somebody that people like. You know, you got to. I mean, you got to do it over and over and over and over and over again. And I mean, like, hopefully, I can have when he's home. Sometime I can have my buddy Mike Miz on. You know, like Mike Miz. You know, I don't know how many years ago he went to Nashville. 5, great player. I used to play with him. You know, played in a band with him, and he just like in the last couple of weeks, probably last month, played his first Grand Ole Opry show. You know,
really.
You know, and I mean everybody's like, you know, but I mean it's like everybody's thrilled for him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it took a long time.
Yeah.
You know, to go down there and get established and get, you know, to move the needle. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and I don't think you can kind of go down there. You got to go down there with the idea of like, okay, I'm going to be here for a long time, you know, and you know, if I have the gift, you know, if I do, which I'm going to, you know, and there's all points in between, you know, like some people stay around like me. I mean, I stayed here and I make records and I write songs and I did this and I've raised my family here, you know, I mean, and that's valid as well, you know, but you kind of got to decide like where you can kind of, you know, like put your flag in the ground,
right,
and like and go from that center. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like I heard a quote once: "It's not about playing poker; it's how long you can stay at the poker table for." You know, that's a good one. But also, there has to be luck involved. You have to. I mean, no matter what industry you're in, to be as successful as possible, you gotta be good at something. You got to work really hard at that something, and then it's right place, right time. And the right place you can control, but the right time, it just happens.
Yeah, it does.
It just happens. So, like, if you want to be a stand-up comic, you probably don't want to do it in Northumberland County.
No,
right? You're going to want to go to, you know, Chicago, New York City, Atlanta, and really give it a go if you're serious about it.
Right.
You know,
I have a buddy. He does he's a musician. He's from Northeast PA. A friend of mine. I mean, he's like, you know, we're from the same scene. We weren't best friends. We didn't play in a band together or anything, but I know him, you know, Pat Finnerty. Okay. And Pat does, you know, does his podcasting and his YouTube channel and his Instagram channel. And you know what I mean? And I just, I saw a video of him a couple days ago. So I thought, I know, I'll zip back around and see how Pat's doing. You know, and he's like kicking ass. Yeah. Down, and he's great at it, and he's funny, and he started with you know, like the Rick Beato, you know who that is? Yep. And he had that, you know, what makes this song great? Yeah. And like Pat started, you know, what makes this song stink? You know, and then he would have, you know, and whatever song it'd be like some, you know, like train song or and he'd do these whole long videos and he's kicking ass. You know, I mean, he's got like a couple 100,000 followers, you know, like on his YouTube channel, and you know, and I hope to get big enough here that maybe sometime, you know, I can be on his or he can be on mine. But it's home for the holidays or something. Maybe Pat will come over. Yeah. But super good guy. Knows so much about music, you know. But it's like he's been doing it a long ass time. Right. and he puts a lot of time in it. And I'm certain I don't know what he's doing with sponsorships now, but
yeah,
he wasn't getting paid anything for a long time.
It doesn't happen overnight.
It
doesn't happen overnight. I hear almost every day someone says, Chad, I hear your voice on the speakers at Wise Markets.
Yeah.
I want to get into voiceovers too. Can you show me how to do the voiceovers so I can get hired to do these kind of things? I said, okay, well, get into radio and do commercials and voiceovers for 25 years for free.
Yeah, exactly.
And then eventually you'll get good enough. You'll get those reps in that you can do that.
And a couple things will move. The needle will move. So.
Yeah.
But it's also, like what you're saying is, at the same time, sometimes, you gotta adapt. And we just spent all this time talking about radio as it was and what it, like what it meant to a community or what it meant to, like to artists.
Yeah.
And how that all fits into the fabric of an area or a place or whatever. But then it has changed and it has lost ground. And like for somebody like you, like you started morphing off into this stuff.
I felt like I had to.
Yeah.
I felt like I had to. It just, for me, I started, like I said, I was like part-time overnights in radio. Mm-hmm. And eventually worked my way up through that radio station, then went to a different radio station in Selinsgrove and worked my way up there to being general manager, like running the radio stations. And this is not what I wanted to do. Like I don't want to be in charge of anybody. And then within that radio station, I started a video production department.
Is that a normal progression for somebody that's like a DJ that like you?
No, not really. I know most DJs just stay as DJs. Maybe they go to be a program director, a music director if they still have them around. A lot of people should advance into sales,
sure,
which is something that I did because there's more money in sales.
Sure.
And then since I had my on-air background and I had my sales background, then they put me into the general manager role, and that was something that I wasn't very comfortable being in.
And you weren't as good at it as you were in some of the other areas? Or
I don't know.
You were good at it?
People say I was okay at it. I was a good boss, but I was not sitting in the right seat of the bus.
That's the, you ever heard of like the Peter Principle?
What's that?
The Peter Principle is like basically like, like all people rise to their maximum level of inefficiency. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So like as you become more and more successful at whatever you do,
right,
you rise to some job that you suck at.
Yes.
In very, very childlike terms.
Sure. No, that's exactly right. Yeah.
You rise up through the hierarchy till you're doing something that you're not any good at anymore.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, when I started, I don't even think about the money. I was just doing it. And then you get to the general manager position and they pay you a very decent salary. And it just got to the point where I'm like, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm at the top of it. So I'm just going to go off and do it on my own. So I literally took the knowledge of what I had and saw the results that was driven by this video production company that I created inside of this radio station. And I knew the sales and I knew the operations and the logistics on how to make website videos for clients. And I went home and, my wife we just had 1-year-old twin girls. Yep. And I went home and I said, I'm quitting my job.
Nice. How'd that go over?
It didn't go over very well.
Yeah.
No.
I think that's one of the key ingredients of a successful career in the arts.
Yeah.
A wife. Yeah. An understanding wife.
Yeah. It took a little convincing.
I've heard these stories from Paul. Yeah.
And when I left, ironically, you guys were playing at Hummel's Wharf Fire Company. You're opening up for Kicks.
Oh, we were playing. Oh, Gentleman East. Yeah. We're playing. Yeah.
And Paul was backstage, and I said to him, I said, "Hey,
oh, really? That was there.
Yeah. It was there backstage at Hummel's Wharf, and I said, "Hey, I quit my job." And he's like,
"I'm listening."
Well, come over and hang. Come over and hang. I said, "Where?" He goes, "Well, I'm renting out that recording studio in Northumberland." And my jaw just dropped.
Yeah.
I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah."
You knew where it was probably.
So because I knew the previous owner, I got married across the street. And like I said, I went to college for recording engineering, and all I ever wanted was to work in a recording studio. That's all I ever wanted.
Yeah.
So years ago, way before, I mean, I knew Paul and I knew you for a long time and stuff, but we weren't really close. And, you know, I got married across the street. I had
in the corner up there.
Yeah, Priestley Savage House.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
you told
right
me
there.
this.
Yeah, and we would have. I had my wedding pictures taken in here in the recording studio. This is way before I even.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I would hang out here on occasion. I had a recording studio in my mom and dad's basement. When things went a little sideways, I needed some money, so I dumped it off to the guy who used to own this. So I was familiar with this recording studio, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe this was here. Nobody told me about this. Yeah. Nobody told me. This is all I wanted to do, and this is 16 miles away from my house. Nobody told me.
Yeah.
So when I saw Paul at Hummel's Wharf, he's like, "Yeah, I'm renting out the studio. Come on over." I said, "I will."
Yeah.
And
sidebar, real quick.
Yeah.
Hummel's Wharf. You know, you sit there and say, "Okay, I played a fire company."
Yeah.
These guys, the gigs that like we opened a couple gigs for Kicks there. And it was like, bar none, you know, maybe that much lower than like a Union Arena crew.
Really? Yeah.
Outstanding. I mean, those guys, you know, I think like, you know, concerts, partying, firefighting's down here somewhere because it was like, they were amazing.
All hands on deck.
You know, I mean, like you pull up and you know what I mean? There's like 3 guys on you before you get out of your vehicle. Yeah. You know what I mean? And like the stage is right there. And they were really, really good.
They built their own stage.
I don't know if they do that anymore, but
they haven't in a couple of years.
But I mean, like they knew how to put on. I mean, you know, from somebody that's a musician and has played all sorts of shows over time, you know, in some pretty big venues over time. Like they really knew how to do it.
Yeah.
And it was impressive.
It is. They always did such a good job. Any fire company really does a good job. They have all the support in the community and it's buttoned up.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. I mean, we've done other ones. You know what I mean? What's DNL, right?
DNL.
DH&L. I always
forget the. There's a couple.
DH&L. Yeah, but like they did a great job too. You know what I mean? So it's like there was like a couple of them over times where they just opened up the doors and set you loose. And it's great. I like playing those kind of places. I do. It
was a blast, and I was happy I was there, and I was happy I met with Paul, and Paul, you know, said, "Come on over." And so I was really excited, but I'm like, but he's not going to remember. Yeah. You know, he got my phone number and stuff, and I went home, and I remember like sitting on the couch, and my wife was there with me. It was over the weekend, and Paul sent me a text, and he goes, "Hey, don't forget Monday, come on over." Oh, cool. And I'm like, "Oh shit, it is real. This is real."
Really?
I'm like, I will come over. I came over, and I think it was on my birthday. I came over, and we sat at that kitchen table, and we just hashed out some ideas, and we hung out in the studio. And we went down the Front Street station every day at 11 o'clock because we're entrepreneurs. And you know, I'm on. This is like it's the best because you know Paul. So we're sitting at the kitchen table, and I'm editing from this little laptop some silly little videos, trying to make ends meet, like a video for $100 here and $100 there. Sure. We're doing whatever I can. And it was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months I've been sitting at that kitchen table, and Paul's like, "You know, I have another studio. There's another studio here."
This
yeah. I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, if you open that door, there's another studio."
So at this point, he owns it. Or
at this point, he owned it. Yes,
he's taken over.
Yeah, right when we moved in, he was still renting, and then we said there might be an option where you can buy this thing, and to give him a little equity, I signed an agreement to pay for rent here to help him.
Sure,
right. And so
tenant.
He opens that door and shows me this giant recording studio that I didn't know anything about for like 5 months. I'm like, "Why aren't you telling me?" He goes,
"I'm sitting at that table."
No, yeah.
Quite a few empires have been launched in that little table.
That little table, absolutely. Yeah. And so then I came in here, and then he told me the whole backstory about, you know, Bob Spangler, and I mean, it was a giant wreck in here. It was a giant attic for like 30 years.
Yeah, it was this like basically the frame of this was framed out when I left in like, you know, the early 90s. You know, it was just sitting there for...
It boggles my mind. How it sat there that long.
Certainly, close to 30 years.
Yeah, and you know, Paul opened it up and he's like, there's a bunch of, it's messy. I don't know. And I just saw opportunity. I said, oh my God, I couldn't believe it.
Right on.
So eventually, I was able to get my own recording studio in a sense, and you know, after that whole long path of a crazy career of doing everything and anything, you land here and been put ever since.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's bonkers.
I remember like that little concrete shelf over there. I remember Paul, you know, sitting there with a drink and rebar going, dumping it in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that was the first thing we installed. He's like, well, we need a bar in here. So we had to put a bar in it. He's like, I'm going to make it out of concrete. I said, okay.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I remember. I just remember that, like sitting on the ground over there, and he's like, okay. Then it went from there. But I mean, like, you know, I mean, in your case, like you've been, you know, you've done all these things, like, you know, like, and I mean, like entrepreneurship stuff, you know what I mean? It's like you're really involved. Like, I mean, I know like you were like videoing, before the pandemic, like broadcasting live, like sports shows. Yeah. I mean, sports games, like regionally. And like your golf tournament and all these things. And like, you've really branched out into all this other stuff that, you know, I want to learn about that mindset for me, you know, because like I've always just really been kind of stuck in, I wouldn't say stuck, but I've always stayed in my lane. Yeah. You know, in the music thing, you know, certainly, you know, okay, well, I'll do live streams and all that kind of stuff, and like in this, you know, but I'm kind of amazed by you guys here. You know, sometimes I'm a little terrified for you and Paul, you know, because like you come up with these ideas, and I'm like, wow, that takes balls, you know. Yeah. That takes balls.
Well, it's just like one of those things. I'm good at a lot of things. I'm not great at any of them. I think I'm good at a lot of things. Yeah. It's I don't know. I just see opportunity. Yeah. And you know, I'm not a videographer. I never called myself a videographer. I never went to school for it. I don't really know the difference between a Nikon and a Canon lens. So I always called myself a producer. So, you know, I'll produce voiceover work. I'll produce a murder mystery dinner theater. I will produce a golf tournament for you to raise money. So I just I'm fortunate enough to be good enough at a lot of different things. Yeah, you know, just to tackle some, you know, some things that I've always wanted to do. You know, it's kind of like throwing spaghetti at a wall, see if it sticks. Sure. That's
well, you know, I give you guys credit. Like, you know, I mean, I kind of see as like you and Paul is kind of similar in that way. You know, like I give you guys credit for, like, I mean, you'll get an idea and just go freaking do it.
Yeah, just give it a go.
You know what I mean? And you know, I'm more measured than that. You know, myself. You know, I'm probably certainly to my detriment. You know what I mean? Because like I'll like like what I would do. You know, if I was you, sometimes I'd get part the way into this thing, and I'm like, nah. You know what I mean? It might be the greatest idea in the world, and I'm like,
well, even like when you're talking about this, you're like, should I come prepared with questions? And stuff? I said, no,
don't come.
Just
prepared.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it.
And I'm you know, I'm learning.
But I think too is like for so long I was always working for somebody, and I would have some crazy ideas that would just get shot down. Sure. And I get it. You know, that's their money. So I think the most beneficial thing for me being an entrepreneur is you can spend money how you see fit, and you give it a chance. And I'm not afraid of falling on my face. I've done it millions of times.
And I have that theory of, you know, I think I said that before, is that, you know, like kind of like if you want to succeed at something, you increase your rate of failure. You know, and I think like really a lot of really successful people that do this thing, they're like, they come up with an idea and they're like, okay, you know, this afternoon they're already working on it. Yeah. You know, and I'm guilty of not doing that. Yeah. I mean, I'll admit, you know, but like by that afternoon they're already working on it. So they're like 5 steps in, you know, within a week they're 5 steps into knowing whether or not it'll work or not. You know what I mean? Like, whereas the next guy might be like, okay, I'm gonna think about this from every angle for 3 months. You know what I mean? And I think acting, whatever, jump and look or whatever the phrase would be.
Right.
And if you're an entrepreneur, I think that's a good way to live. If you can survive,
it is.
If you have an understanding wife,
yeah.
If you have an understanding wife.
Listen,
if you got a wife,
if you got an understanding wife,
like I had Jack on here, and he's like, we sold all our stuff.
It's the best.
We sold all our stuff. We're moving to Los Angeles. Our singer went to jail. Then he moved in with us when he got out of prison. It's just so. That sounds like most people would never even think, like they wouldn't even like, put the China on eBay, you know what I mean? Not that you put that in the paper shop or whatever. They wouldn't even do that. They wouldn't even get that far.
No.
They wouldn't take that chance.
No, what do you have to lose?
Yeah. So
what do you have to lose?
You really don't.
You don't. You just do kind of whatever you feel is right in your gut, and a lot of times you're wrong, but who cares?
Well, kudos to you guys. Like I that's one thing I like about working out of this place. Like everybody's, there's been a handful of businesses formed since I've been here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Since I've been here, you know what I mean? Just different ideas, people coming up with an idea and trying things, and and I like that. I like that sort of I don't know, entrepreneurial spirit. You know what I mean? It's like and I'm happy to be part of it.
And that's the best. Like we're so fortunate enough to. It's not really a job because we all do a lot of different jobs. We all do a lot of different things. We're all a lot of subcontractors. That's just what we do.
Yeah.
But to get up on a Monday morning and just come here, and it's like
you look forward to Monday.
Oh my God, Mondays are the best days. Today's a Monday. We're recording on a Monday.
We are recording on a Monday.
It is the best. Not that I don't like my weekends. I love my weekends, but Monday mornings are just the best. And I think 99% of people say differently.
That was the big thing, like getting personal, like when, as I was a kid, like my dad really hated his job, it. And he was always a construction worker, but like it was seasonal. He'd get laid off in the winter. You know what I mean? So eventually he got to the point where, he got an opportunity to go get a factory gig.
Yeah.
And it like aged him like a dozen years in two. And I watched that happen. So that was like certainly my love of music, but also that it made a big impression on me.
Yeah.
I want to do something. I want to do something that I at least want to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I realize, people look at it like, some people look at it different ways. Like you add value to the world, via your job, and then that makes you happy. The results, the value you add, at a job or whatever, and like some people can do that and go home. I never could.
I can't. I won't be able to go back.
Yeah,
I've had some temptations.
Most don't,
just because of that comfort. A lot of times, but it's still a job. It could still go sideways on you. Here you are in control of your destiny.
Sure.
But there's times where I've worked a lot of hours. I enjoy it a lot. So when people say, boy, it must be nice to sit with Bret and have a little juice in your coffee on a Monday. It must be nice. I say, yeah, it is nice. It is real nice. But you didn't see me at 2:00 in the morning, pumping out a Knoebels video.
Right on.
Ripping your hair out.
Yeah, because I'm like looking down the line and I need a $4,000 by the end of the month, or whatever the number is.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like, okay, well, I just got to use my brain, and you always figure it out. You always figure it out.
I just never want it to end. That's why I am a little cautious about oh my God, what happens if this doesn't work?
Yeah.
Or what happens if I don't get that client for next month or whatever. Fortunate enough, I've been at it for almost 8 years and paid every mortgage payment.
Yeah.
So far so good.
No foreclosures.
Again, not in it for the money. I'm in for the the experience of being here every day and being with a bunch of like-minded goofballs and enjoying it. Yeah.
People from an insane asylum.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of everything going bad, what do you think is going to happen with AI?
AI will take. Personally speaking, I think
we'll wind
AI
up with that in a dystopian world.
AI is going to take my job. I know that for sure. AI is taking my gig.
It's going to take your gig?
Yes, AI is going to take my gig. As a videographer, it's going to take your job.
Yeah.
As a social media expert, as advertising and marketing in the realm of the way we know it now, AI is going to change it. It hands down, it is. But AI can't show up at a golf tournament. AI can't perform a murder mystery dinner theater for 80 people. So there's elements to my business where I'm pivoting.
Sure.
AI can't physically put you in front of a microphone with lights. It can edit it for you.
Sure.
Which we see.
Yeah.
And truth be told, what I do, you do a long format video and you throw it in AI and it chops it up into 30 smaller bits in 10 minutes. Yep. And it looks fantastic and it works. So, right now I'm using it as a tool. Yeah. But, I really have to broaden my horizons because AI is coming.
Sure. I always look at it like, there's different things. Like sometimes when like business gets slow or something, we're kind of we're going to end this the way we started it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like when things get slow or something, you just kind of like, I'll do things like where, okay, well, I got a window here that I don't have anything going on. You know what I mean? And I always have something going on, whether I'm playing or I'm doing business or I'm,
right.
You know what I mean? Or I'm in a session, you know what I mean? It's like, there's always something going on. I might not be in there recording, but there's something going on, you know what I mean? So, or I might not be playing a gig that day, but whatever the case may be. So like what I'll do is like things will get slower. And then it's usually I'll just say, okay, well, I'm going to reach out to 20 people a day until it picks back up. And it usually doesn't take many days of doing that, you know what I mean? And if you have a sales staff, and so sometimes because you're like kind of like the guy, you're doing all the work, you're doing the sales, you're doing the accounting, you're doing the QuickBooks, and you're following up with the clients, you make sure everybody's happy. You know what I mean? But sometimes, sometimes you're overwhelmed, and then sometimes it clears out, or sometimes you're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah, then you're overwhelmed because it cleared out.
Because it cleared out, and you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it's going to get busy again. And I think like the future for me, I think that like first of all, there's always going to be a demand for something that's scarce. You know what I mean? Like if you're the guy, you know what I mean?
Right.
And they know you're the guy, you can do the job. You know what I mean? They know the feeling that you create to the people that you've done it for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're going to be all right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's super. Like there was going back to radio, there was, it's different now. A guy said, a radio promotional guy said to me one time, he said, hey, if you sell records, you get to keep making them, and it's like, well, now the records don't sell, they're free.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, okay, well, people come to your shows, you get to keep playing them, and whatever the case may be. And it really kind of comes down to kind of what you're saying, like that personal connection to people.
Yes.
And something, I'm just like I really, I love storytelling. I love stories. That's why I'm doing this.
Right.
And it's because I love to hear people's stories.
Yeah. People are still going to crave the human element. They're going the entertainment.
The entertainment of it, and the scarcity of like, there's only one you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if like you're, that will, if you're known and you can create this certain vibe, whatever it is you decide to take on.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you write a book, or I write a book, or you make a Blade Horse record, or whatever, there's a certain amount of people that are going to be interested in that because of who you are.
Right.
Maybe you're going to be a senator. I don't know.
Who knows? But that never goes away.
No.
That's never
human nature.
That's human nature. Absolutely.
But like all the little videos you did for $100, those are gone.
They're gone. Never to be seen again. And that's okay by me.
There you go. There we go. We have solved it. There we go, my friend.
Cheers, my friend.
That's it.
This podcast was produced by Stone State Entertainment.